Under the neon lights of downtown, where music and lies blend in the same rhythm, a young woman named Lila danced, not for fame, not for joy, but for survival. The streets outside shimmered under the drizzle, their reflections like streaks of melted color. From the doorways came laughter, music, and smoke. The city lived loud, too loud for dreams to speak, except for one small stage inside a club called the Velvet Moon. There, beneath the glow of blue and crimson lights, Lila moved with grace that didn't belong in that world. Her steps were fluid, elegant, too controlled for a place built on chaos. To the crowd, she was a performer. To herself, she was a prisoner counting the beats until freedom. Applause erupted. She smiled, the kind of smile practiced in mirrors, and bowed before stepping off stage. Behind the curtain, the air was thick with perfume, sweat, and broken ambition. Other dancers chatted, some laughing, some arguing. Lila walked past them quietly, the hem of her dress brushing against the sticky floor. Inside the dressing room, the noise faded. Her reflection stared back from a cracked mirror, the fissure cutting across her face like a silent reminder. Dreams break, but reflections remain. She crouched near the corner, lifted a piece of old wallpaper, and reached behind the wall. Her fingers found a small metal box, worn but sacred. She opened it. Inside were crumpled bills, coins, and a folded paper that read in smudged marker, "Dance Academy Fund." For anyone else, it was spare change. For Lila, it was the blueprint of her escape. She placed 3 new bills inside, tonight's savings, and whispered to herself, "Someday soon." A knock interrupted her. Vince, the club manager, leaned against the doorframe, his shirt half untucked, a cigarette hanging from his lips. "Good show tonight," he said, exhaling smoke. "The crowd liked you." "Thanks," she replied softly, wiping off her makeup. He flicked ash into a tray. "You could make triple if you took private gigs. Some of the guys asked about you." Lila didn't look up. "Then I'd lose more than I earn." Vince chuckled. "You're wasting your charm here, kid. You could have been a star." "I still will be," she said quietly. That made him pause. He studied her face, saw the steady calm in her eyes, and shrugged. "You've got fire, I'll give you that, but fire dies fast in this place." When he left, she exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of the whole room. Outside, the night air felt cooler. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement, a slow rhythm that echoed her heartbeat. She passed flickering signs, closed diners, and the faint hum of traffic. At one intersection, she stopped, not because of the light, but because of what she saw. Through a foggy window of a small community center, a group of little girls watched a ballet class. Their faces were pressed to the glass, eyes wide with wonder. Their shoes were torn, their clothes mismatched, but their gaze held pure awe. Lila stood there for a long moment. The music from inside drifted faintly through the walls, classical, delicate, innocent. Something stirred in her chest. "One day," she whispered, "you'll all dance too." Her apartment was a single room above a noisy laundromat. The air smelled faintly of detergent and damp hope. She placed the metal box beneath her bed, next to an old notebook filled with numbers, every dollar she'd saved since she started. Total, $1,862. Still far from enough, but closer than when she began. She washed off her makeup, tied her hair, and faced her cracked mirror again. Then she danced, not for the crowd, not for money, but for herself. The sound of the city below became her music, the hum of dryers, the siren in the distance, the faint buzz of streetlights. Her movements were quieter now, more fragile, but more real. In that moment she wasn't a bar dancer, she was a teacher rehearsing for her unseen students. The next night, the Velvet Moon pulsed with noise. But tonight felt different. Lila's movements carried new purpose, a strange, soft defiance. Every spin, every wave of her arm whispered, "I'm not staying here forever." Among the audience, a man watched silently. He wasn't laughing or drinking. He was studying her precision, the discipline behind her grace. When the performance ended, he waited near the exit. As she passed, he spoke, his voice calm but confident. "You've had training." Lila hesitated. "A little. Years ago. I run a small dance company uptown," he said, offering a simple business card. "Ross School of Dance and Movement. We're looking for an assistant choreographer. It's not much money, but it's real dance." She blinked, unsure. "Is this serious?" He smiled faintly. "Come by tomorrow, 10 a.m. My name's Ethan Ross." He left as quietly as he came. That night, Lila sat on her bed staring at the card. She turned it over in her hands again and again, reading the name until it felt like a secret spell. Could it be real? People made promises in her world, promises that disappeared faster than smoke. Vince's voice echoed in her mind. "Fire dies fast in this place." She looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Then I'll burn brighter," she whispered. She packed her old leotard, her worn shoes, the ones that had carried her through both humiliation and hope. The next morning, she woke before dawn. The city was quiet, washed in gray light. She walked to the subway with her shoes tied together by their laces, slung over her shoulder. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fatigue, but from fear. At one point, the heel of her boot snapped on a crack in the pavement. She stumbled, nearly fell. For a second she froze, staring at the broken shoe, the universe testing her resolve. She took it off, held it in her hand, and smiled through the sting. "Not today," she whispered, and kept walking barefoot until she reached the studio. The Ross School of Dance was nothing like she imagined. It was bright, orderly, alive. Inside, mirrors reflected clean light instead of broken glass. Students stretched in harmony. Music filled the air like sunlight. She stood at the doorway, clutching her shoes. For a moment, she wanted to turn back, afraid she didn't belong in a place this pure. Then she saw her reflection in the polished floor, the same girl from the bar, but standing taller. "Every polished floor reminds me of what I lost," she thought, "and what I can still become." Taking a breath, she stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her. That day would change everything. But she didn't know it yet. The next morning, the city was painted in gold, that soft, forgiving light that comes after a night of rain. Lila walked toward Ross School of Dance, barefoot inside her old sneakers, clutching her worn shoes in a paper bag. Her heart beat faster than her steps. Every sound, the subway doors closing, the traffic humming, felt like part of a rhythm guiding her forward. As she reached the building, she stopped in front of the glass doors. Through them, she could see her reflection, hair neatly tied, eyes wide with both fear and hope. Behind her reflection stretched the street she'd walked from, dark, cracked, noisy. Ahead was silence, mirrors, and the unknown. She exhaled slowly. "Don't freeze," she whispered. "You've danced through worse." Inside, the studio smelled of pine floor polish and sweat, the scent of discipline. Sunlight streamed across the polished floors, bouncing off the mirrored walls. Every dancer moved with purpose. There were no bright costumes here, no smoke or flashing lights, just precision and control. A woman at the front desk looked up from her clipboard. "Can I help you?" Lila cleared her throat. "I'm here to see Mr. Ethan Ross," he said. "Audition at 10. The woman's eyebrows lifted slightly, scanning her from head to toe, the thrift store jacket, the shoes tied together by a lace, the hopeful eyes. "He's in Studio B, down the hall, second door on the left." Lila smiled nervously. "Thank you." She walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing faintly. Behind the doors, she heard the rhythmic thump of music and the synchronized sound of bodies landing and spinning. It was like hearing another language, one she used to speak fluently but had almost forgotten. When she entered Studio B, the world fell into slow motion. Ethan stood near the mirror, instructing a group of young dancers. He turned when he saw her. "You came," he said simply, smiling. Lila nodded, clutching her bag. "I wasn't sure if you were serious." "I was," he said. "Are you ready?" She looked around. The dancers were stretching, confident, poised, and graceful. She suddenly felt small, like an outsider sneaking into a temple. I haven't danced in a real studio in years, she admitted. Ethan's expression softened. Then this floor will remember you. He clapped his hands. All right, everyone. 5-minute break. Lila, you can use the floor. The others moved aside, forming a loose circle around her. She felt every pair of eyes on her, curious, cautious, maybe even doubtful. Her palms were sweaty, her knees trembled. The music started, a slow piano melody, gentle but uncertain, like the story of her life. She closed her eyes. For a second, she saw herself back in the velvet moon, lights flashing, drunk voices shouting, applause that never meant anything. And then she remembered her little metal box, the label written in hope, Dance Academy Fund. She took a deep breath and began to move. At first, her body hesitated, stiff, mechanical. But as the melody swelled, her movements softened. Her arms drew wide arcs through the air. Her steps whispered across the floor. The music carried her into a world where she wasn't performing for survival but dancing for truth. The audience, those few dancers, and Etha grew silent. Every movement of hers told a story, of loss, of endurance, of light trying to break through the cracks. When she finished, there was no applause, only stillness. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his eyes filled with quiet awe. That, he said, wasn't rusty. That was real. Lila blinked back tears. Real doesn't always pay bills. He smiled. Maybe not, but it can open doors. How would you like to teach Saturday classes for beginners? It's part-time, but it's a start. Lila's breath caught. Teach? Yes. You have emotions that most dancers spend years trying to fake. I can teach technique, but I can't teach heart. She laughed softly, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he replied. And she did. The next few weeks were a blur. Lila worked nights at the club and days at the studio. Her schedule was brutal, sometimes only 3 hours of sleep, but her spirit was alive. At the Velvet Moon, she danced for survival. At Ross School, she danced for purpose. Each morning, she arrived before everyone else, mopping the floors just to have a few minutes of silence with the mirrors. She practiced until her muscles burned. When the first students arrived, children from middle-class families, she guided them gently, her voice calm but sure. Don't just move, she'd tell them. Feel. The floor is your friend, not your enemy. Most of them didn't know her story. To them, she was simply Miss Lila, the soft-spoken new instructor who danced like she was remembering something sacred. One evening after class, Ethan approached her. You're a natural with the kids, he said. They trust you. Lila smiled, packing her shoes. Maybe because I still remember what it's like to be one of them, scared, trying too hard to belong. He looked at her thoughtfully. You've got something rare, Lila. You don't just dance. You make people believe they can. That night, walking home, those words echoed in her head. You make people believe they can. She looked up at the city skyline, at all the glowing windows like fragments of dreams scattered across the sky, and whispered, then maybe I can too. But balance came at a cost. The dual life was wearing her down. At the bar, Vince noticed her fatigue. You've been off lately, he said one night, leaning on the counter. Trouble sleeping? Just new commitments. He frowned. You're not getting soft, are you? The customers notice when you're distracted. Lila's jaw tightened. Maybe they should stop watching and start listening. He smirked. To what? Your conscience. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes burned. To the difference between dancing and selling yourself. That silenced him. She turned and walked toward the stage, back straight, heart heavy but unshaken. When the music started, she danced not for the crowd, but against it. Each movement was defiance. Each step said, I don't belong here anymore. After midnight, she returned home and opened her metal box. Her savings had grown to $2,350. Slow progress, but progress all the same. She touched the bills, then wrote in her notebook, New goal. 1 year. Find a place. Start small. She closed the lid and sat by the window. The city lights flickered below, a map of possibilities. Somewhere between exhaustion and hope, she whispered, "I'm getting closer." The next morning, when she walked into the studio, she found a flyer on the bulletin board. It read, "Community Youth Scholarship Program. Apply to teach dance in underserved areas." Lila's heart raced. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, but also everything she feared. Exposure. It would mean stepping out of the shadows, letting people see who she truly was. She hesitated for a long moment. Then she pulled the flyer down, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her bag. Her reflection caught her eye in the mirror again, tired, determined, unbreakable, and she smiled. Because this time, she wasn't just chasing her dream, she was walking toward it. Weeks turned into months, and the studio became more than a workplace. It became her sanctuary. Every morning, sunlight spilled across the mirrors like blessings, and every night she stayed back just a little longer, replaying choreography, tracing her reflection, whispering corrections to herself. Her students adored her. They called her Miss Lila, and her classes filled faster than anyone expected. Parents lingered by the door to watch, drawn by the way she taught not from pride, but from passion. She didn't talk about herself much. But every once in a while, during breaks, she'd catch herself smiling, watching her students laugh, stumble, try again. In those moments, she saw herself in every child. Each one a fragment of who she used to be, eager, scared, unstoppable. One afternoon, Ethan stepped into her class mid-session. He watched quietly from the corner as Lila corrected a girl's posture, kneeling, speaking softly, adjusting her hands with care. When the class ended, he approached her with a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "An application," he said. "The Community Youth Scholarship Program. You'd be perfect for it." Lila froze. "You kept that?" He nodded. "And I think you're ready." She hesitated, her smile faltering. "It's not that simple, Ethan." "Why not?" Her eyes drifted to the window, to the reflection of the street below, the same one that led to the velvet moon. "Because people like me don't get second chances so easily." Ethan studied her quietly. "People like you? People with pasts they can't put on a resume." That night, at the bar, her double life pressed down heavier than ever. Vince leaned against the counter, swirling his drink. "You've changed, Lila. Used to be the highlight of the night. Now you're just distant." She didn't look up. "Maybe I outgrew the spotlight." He smirked. "Nobody outgrows money." His words stung, but she didn't answer. She stepped onto the stage anyway. The music started, the lights spun, and the crowd cheered. But her movements felt different now. Not desperate, not empty. They were defiant. Every spin, every turn carried a message she didn't dare to speak aloud. "I'm not yours anymore." And the crowd, unknowingly, applauded her rebellion. Back at the studio the next day, Ethan noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. "Rough night?" he asked. "Long one," she admitted, forcing a smile. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said gently. "But I hope you know, whatever you're carrying, it doesn't change what I see when you dance." Her eyes softened. "And what do you see?" He paused. "Someone who survived the fire and still dances in the ashes." For the first time, she didn't look away. That evening, she stayed late again, alone in the studio. The city lights outside flickered through the windows, painting her reflection in gold and shadow. She started to dance, no audience, no music, just her breath and heartbeat. Each movement was a memory. Her mother's laughter, the first night at the Velvet Moon, the weight of her father's absence. The coins are in the metal box. By the time she stopped, tears had already found her cheeks. She looked in the mirror, not at the dancer she wished to become, but at the woman she already was, bruised, brave, becoming. The next morning, she handed Ethan the filled-out form. "I thought you said it wasn't simple," he said, surprised. She smiled faintly. "It's not, but maybe it's worth trying anyway." He grinned. "Now, That's the Lila I know. A week later, the call came. She'd been accepted. Lila sat on the edge of her bed, phone still in hand, disbelief written across her face. Her mother, frail but smiling, clapped her hands softly. See? I told you. God doesn't close doors. He just makes sure you learn to dance before opening new ones. Lila laughed through tears. I hope I can make you proud. You already have. The following weekend, she began teaching free dance workshops at a community center in the poorer part of town. The children there reminded her of the ones who used to peek through the bar window, curious, fascinated, innocent. She brought secondhand shoes and donated mirrors, setting them up with help from her students at Ross School. The first day, only 5 kids showed up. By the second week, there were 20. By the third, the room was full. Lila found herself smiling again, wide, unguarded, real. But behind that joy, trouble was stirring. One evening, as she was leaving the community center, she spotted a familiar figure across the street, Vince. He leaned against a lamppost, cigarette glowing in the dark. Her pulse quickened. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. He took a slow drag and smirked. "Funny place for a bar dancer to hang out. Thought I'd see what kind of classes you're teaching these days." Her voice trembled. "You don't belong here, Vince." He shrugged. "Neither do you. But that's the thing about the past. It follows you, doesn't it?" She clenched her fists. "You can't scare me anymore." "Oh, I'm not trying to scare you," he said, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "Just reminding you, people don't like secrets, especially when they find out their kids are being taught by someone like you." He walked away, leaving her frozen under the dim streetlight, the glow flickering against her terrified eyes. That night, Lila sat by her window, staring at the metal box again. Her dream finally had a shape, but now it felt fragile, like glass about to crack. For the first time in a long while, she didn't write anything in her notebook. She just whispered to the empty room, "Please, don't let them take this from me." A week after Lila's community classes began gaining attention, her phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Notifications piled up. Social media posts. Messages. Emails. One headline stood out. "From bar dancer to community hero, Lila's journey inspires the city." Lila stared at the screen, her stomach twisted. Some messages were praising her courage, others were judgmental, questioning her past. The comments were a mixture of awe, admiration, and scorn. For years, she had hidden behind silence, surviving in the shadows. Now, suddenly, the shadows had grown long enough to stretch over the city, and everyone could see. That afternoon, at the original small studio, more than 30 students crowded the room. Parents peeked in through the windows. Lila moved between them, correcting posture, adjusting arms, and demonstrating steps. She had grown into her role, confident, patient, radiant. Ethan watched from the doorway, his arms crossed. "Looks like your dream is finally walking itself out into the world," he said. Lila paused, breath shallow. I'm not sure I'm ready for all this attention." He smiled. "You've already taught more than you think. People are drawn to honesty. You can't fake that." Her gaze drifted to the mirror. She saw not just her reflection, but the echoes of every step she had taken, on stage, in the streets, in the lonely dark of her apartment. She realized that every movement, every coin saved, every tear shed, had built this room of possibility. Days later, she organized a fundraising showcase at the small studio. Her students performed barefoot, their faces shining with joy. Lila spoke afterward, her voice steady, carrying through the modest hall. This academy began with a small box of coins and a belief that dreams belong to everyone, not just the privileged. These girls remind me that hope dances best in hearts that refuse to stop trying. The applause wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Parents and volunteers stepped forward with donations. A local business offered to sponsor shoes and uniforms. Even Vince sent a small check with a note, "For the next generation of dancers, proud of you." By the week's end, Lila had enough funds to move into a larger studio, one with mirrored walls, hardwood floors, and sunlight flooding through tall windows. The grand opening of Rising Steps Academy was quiet but emotional. Lila gathered her students in a circle. "This place exists because of all of you," she said. "I was once told that my dance wasn't respectable, but respect isn't given. It's earned when your purpose is true." The girls clapped and hugged her tightly. Lila's chest swelled. Every struggle she had endured, every judgment, every lonely night, every coin saved, had led to this moment. Weeks passed, and the academy expanded. Lila introduced scholarships, guest instructors, and launched weekend workshops for single mothers. The academy had grown into a movement, a safe space where dreams could flourish. But life wasn't done testing her resolve. Late one rainy evening, while locking the first studio, Lila noticed smoke curling from a corner of the room. Panic seized her. She ran inside with a fire extinguisher, coughing as the smoke thickened. By the time the fire department arrived, the studio was damaged, mirrors shattered, the ceiling scorched, and the hardwood blackened. No one was hurt, but Lila felt a deep, hollow ache. Outside in the rain, Ethan wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. "It's just a building," he said. "What you've built can't burn." But Lila couldn't speak. She stared at the smoldering remains, the first physical proof of her dream, and wondered if she'd have to start all over. In the following days, her students and community members visited the damaged studio, leaving flowers and handwritten notes on the locked doors. One note from Sophia, her first student, read, "Miss Lila taught us that dreams don't end when something breaks. They start again when we rebuild." Those words sparked hope. The city rallied. Volunteers came forward. Media outlets covered the rebuilding efforts. Donations poured in. Former students returned to help with cleaning, painting, and setting up the studio. A month later, the academy reopened, brighter and more welcoming than ever. The old metal box, once a hidden treasure, was placed in a glass case near the entrance, labeled, "The Beginning of a Dream." It stood as a symbol, proof that small acts of perseverance could build a legacy. The night before the grand reopening, Lila stayed alone in the studio. Barefoot, she moved slowly across the polished floors. Each step told a story: fear, resilience, hope, and triumph. Her reflection shimmered in the mirror. For the first time, she saw not a bar dancer struggling to survive, but a woman who had transformed pain into purpose, her scars into steps, her dream into doors for others. As the last note of her silent dance faded, she whispered, "This is for every girl who thinks she's not enough. You are. You always were." The following day, the grand reopening drew a crowd larger than she could have imagined. Media cameras, parents, students, and community leaders filled the space. Lila watched quietly as her students danced with unrestrained joy. Later, a representative from the City Cultural Foundation approached her. "We'd like to offer a community grant to expand your academy to other neighborhoods," she said. Lila's chest tightened. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the woman said, smiling, and Lila did. By the end of the year, Rising Steps Academy had grown to 3 branches, serving neighborhoods across the city. Former students became instructors, scholarships flourished. The academy had transformed not just lives, but the city itself. Every time Lila watched her students dance, she remembered the metal box, the coins, and the small beginnings that had carried her through so much darkness. And every night, when she danced alone in the empty studio, she whispered, "Dreams are not what you see when you sleep. They're what keep you awake when the world tells you to give up." Her reflection smiled back, and for the first time she didn't just see herself. She saw all the lives she had touched and all the futures she had ignited. The morning sun poured through the wide windows of the newly rebuilt Rising Steps Academy, glinting off polished mirrors and freshly varnished floors. The scent of sunlight, paint, and hope mingled in the air, tangible, warm, alive. Lila stood near the doorway, watching as her students arrived one by one. They ran through the entrance laughing, their worn shoes replaced with donations, their backpacks bouncing at their sides. Their eyes sparkled, wide with joy, curiosity, and ambition. This was her dream realized. Not the dream of fame, but the dream of impact, the dream she had nurtured in secret with every coin she had saved. That evening marked the 5th anniversary of Rising Steps Academy. Banners fluttered outside reading, "From one dream to 100 dancers." Families, local officials, and journalists filled the hall. Former students now stood proudly beside her as instructors, carrying forward the lessons they had learned not just in dance, but in courage, discipline, and belief in themselves. Backstage, Lila looked through the small curtain gap. Memories rushed in. The neon lights of the velvet moon, the clink of coins dropped into her metal box, the little girls watching ballet through the foggy community center window. Every hardship, every lonely night, had led to this, a space where hope could breathe. She whispered, almost to herself, "We made it." The performance that night, titled Steps of Hope, was not merely a display of skill, it was a story told in movement. It began with a single dancer under a dim spotlight, symbolizing Lila's early life, trapped in shadows. Gradually, more dancers joined, a growing ensemble representing the lives touched by her dream. Every leap and turn carried the tension of struggle, the joy of discovery, the quiet dignity of persistence. The audience was silent, absorbed. When the final chord faded, a long, reverent pause held the room, and then applause erupted, thunderous and heartfelt. People stood, some wiping away tears. When Lila stepped onto the stage, her heart beat in rhythm with the clapping. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel everything: pride, relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of purpose. After the applause settled, a woman from the National Arts Council approached. "Miss Hart," she said warmly, "your academy has transformed lives. We'd like to include Rising Steps in a nationwide arts initiative with funding to expand into schools where children have never seen a dance studio." Lila's voice trembled. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the woman smiled. She did. Months later, Lila stood before a packed auditorium in another city as a guest speaker at a youth empowerment event. Wearing a simple white dress, she spoke without notes, her voice calm yet powerful. "I used to dance in places where people came to forget their pain. Now, I dance to help others remember their worth. Life took me through dark corridors, but I learned that light doesn't always come from the sky. Sometimes it comes from within us. Don't let anyone shame you for the paths you've had to take. Dignity isn't in where you stand, it's in what you stand for. I danced for survival, but I saved for purpose. And today, that purpose has created hundreds of dreams that will outlive me." Young girls crowded around afterward, asking for advice, hugs, and guidance. Some shared that Lila's story gave them courage to dream, to step beyond their fear. Back at the original academy, Lila watched Sophia, her very first student, teaching a class. The little girl who once wore torn sneakers now stood poised and confident, guiding others with patience and skill. Sophia noticed Lila and ran over. "Miss Lila, you said I'd teach others someday. You were right." Lila hugged her tightly. "You made me right." She laughed softly, letting the weight of the past lift just a little. Weeks later, an invitation arrived from an international arts foundation in London, honoring her for transformative impact through the arts. On stage, receiving the award, Lila said, "When I started saving money in a little box years ago, I wasn't saving for wealth. I was saving for change, one coin at a time. I wanted to give girls what I once longed for, a place to belong, a place to move without fear. Today, I realize that every small act of perseverance creates ripples. Those ripples become waves, and waves, when joined together, can move mountains." The audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Somewhere, Ethan clapped silently, pride glimmering in his eyes. That night, alone in her hotel room overlooking the city skyline, Lila pulled out her old metal box, dented, engraved, worn by time. Inside, no coins remained, only a folded photo of her first students, smiling despite everything. She traced their faces, whispering, "Dream achieved, dream continues." Months passed. Rising Steps Academy had grown into a community network of multiple branches, serving neighborhoods and cities alike. Former students became instructors, scholarships flourished, and the academy was recognized as a hub of hope, courage, and creativity. Every time Lila watched her students dance, she remembered the coins, the hardships, and the quiet nights of doubt. Every step reminded her that perseverance, courage, and love could transform lives. And when she danced alone in the empty studio barefoot, she whispered to her reflection, "Dreams are not what you see when you sleep. They're what keep you awake when the world tells you to give up." Her reflection smiled back, not the young bar dancer of the past, but a woman who turned shadows into light and struggle into a legacy.